Welcome back to the Genome Dyno Cell, where today we're going to be installing sports cats and doing a stage 2 tune on this E3 2018 4-litre V8 Cayenne Turbo. Although this is a 2018 car, which is pre-PPF, so we can use just standard off-the-shelf sports cats for this, the newer cars, so from sort of March 18 onwards, they started to install them with the PPF. Now, IPE sports cats, which is what we're using on this, fit exactly the same whether the car has got PPF filters or not. The main difference being is when you put sports cats on a newer model, you're going to need to code out the OPF as well. So on this particular one, I don't need to do that. I can just fit the sports cats and then do our engine calibration and gearbox calibration to make sure they're working in harmony together. So what we're going to do is install the IPE sports cats now, put it on the dyno, run it with the sports cats but standard calibration. We'll probably get an engine light, but it doesn't matter because it'll only be for the cat efficiency codes, so it won't affect the way the car's driving. It'll just amend the short-term fuel trims and throw a light on. Once we've done that and we're happy that the car's performing as it should do from standard, then we'll make a start on the ECU calibration. So in front of me, we've got the stock graph from this E3 Cayenne Turbo. Now, it's making a little bit more than what you'd expect from factory as a result of the better flow on these sports cats, but you can see it's a bit untidy. So up here where it's got the better flow and therefore it can make a little bit more power, it's actually a little bit messy because it's getting quite hot and it's trying to add ignition time in and it's all just getting a bit messy up there. But on the in-trim, it hits just over 500 wheel horsepower, a slight peak up to about 520 wheel horsepower there, which I'm not surprised about, but like I say, it needs tidying up. And then we've got just over 550 foot-pounds of torque, pretty much most of the way through the rev range until 4600, where the turbos start running out of steam and it sort of drops off. Now, 520, I would have expected 500 wheel horsepower on this car standard. That would give us about a 10% correction factor between the drivetrain losses, so from what you're producing at the engine versus what's getting delivered to the road in the form of wheel horsepower. I usually quote around 10 to 12% for a correction. Bear in mind, we're running this four-wheel drive, sometimes it's a little bit higher, but again, we still use 10 to 12% correction just to make sure that if a customer goes to any other dyno, they're not going to be disappointed by the results. So everything's sort of as it should be there. The big thing to note on this car is the intake temperatures. Now, we are in the height of summer, it is pretty hot at the moment, so we are struggling to keep stuff cold, but we're getting towards 70 degrees of intake temp. Now, the ECU will start to recognise that and back everything off as a result of that, and you can sort of see that happening up and around here, sort of doing it here. It's trying to add more, it wants to add more because it's got more flow from the high flow sports cats, but it's getting hot, so it's sort of saying, you know, yes, no, which is essentially why it's a bit wavy. What we want to try and do is tidy all that up, try and get some cool runs once we've got the actual calibration done. And I'm actually aiming for somewhere around 700 foot-pound and anything around 620 wheel horsepower I'd be happy with. So we'll go away, build the calibration, flash it onto the car, run it up, see where we're at, get an idea from the data logs of if we're happy with what we're doing, see what it's changed, and then we'll take the car on the road once we're happy that the dyno side of the production is done. Okay, so we're going to show you a little bit of behind the scenes here. I'm not going to go too deep into the data logs on this particular video. There's loads of me doing that, and it can sometimes get a little bit boring. Now, the thing that we need to see as tuners, more importantly than a dyno graph, is basically all these channels here. And what every one of these is doing is it's logging something specific within the ECU that tells us that when we're making changes, are we making changes to the right thing? Is it doing what we're asking it to do? So in essence, the first thing that we need to check here, obviously we need RPM as a reference, which is what that line is there. The bit rate on this is pretty slow actually, but anyway, it doesn't really matter. So the absolute throttle position is awful in standard form. It sort of like builds really slowly. So we've got 50% throttle or 56% throttle at the bottom here, where we're actually at 100% on the pedal. So that's typical of something that looks like it's trying to control boost pressure using the throttle plate. You can see it opens really slowly all the way through, gets to 5,556 RPM before it's at wide open throttle, which is 88%, but that basically means wide open in this case. And then it starts to shut off, which again is a little bit strange, but I imagine it's doing that to try and control the boost pressure. And if we look at boost pressure, you can see the boost curve is, again, quite tame, but it's sort of curved like this, which suggests that, similar to the throttle trace, it's sort of curved in a similar sort of fashion, so you would expect that it's basically using the throttle plate to control the boost. Down the bottom here we've got 1.148, so there's loads of improvement we can make on that at 2,500 RPM, and at absolute peak we're making around 1.45, so there's tons and tons we can get from the boost. But before we do that, we need to see in standard form, are we pulling any ignition timing out? And as you can see here, ideally we want to be pulling none. In standard form, it's pulling 1.5 on one cylinder and 2.25 at the very, very top on the other cylinder. So I'm not too worried about that. If it was pulling, say, 3 degrees out across all of those cylinders there during a stock run, then we pretty much can be sure that if we turn the boost up, it's going to pull more ignition timing out and we're going to struggle to make power. In the same sense as if we try to add ignition timing on a trace that's already pulling out in stock form, well, it's just going to pull even more timing out into it because it's clearly got a fuel issue, or we've got too much temperature in the cell, or whatever it might be. But in this case, we're looking pretty good for being able to turn this car up. So, last couple of things, I need to check a lot of these, but the basics are boost pressure, ignition timing and throttle. Have we got a wide open throttle? How much boost pressure are we making? Can we make more boost pressure, so can we get more air into the cylinder without pulling all the timing out? Can we advance the timing a little bit? And that will then give us some idea as to how far we can go with the tuning and what we can get out of it. At absolute peak, this is making a maximum of sort of between 7.5 degrees of advanced ignition there. So there's loads of room on the table here. I'm going to basically build a tune, send it down to the guys. We'll start with the base file, build that up over the next couple of revisions. If we're happy with what we get first time out, great. We'll jump back into a log of the tuned vehicle and we'll compare those to give you some idea of what the difference is. So what we can now see in front of me on the screen is absolutely insane. I mean, this car has made some serious gains, especially in the mid-range here. I mean, stock torque versus tune torque, you know, before we even get into the figures, it's a monster torque curve, is that. It's going to be insane to drive. To go into a little bit more detail, where you were at sort of 560 foot-pounds of torque, up here, bearing in mind how warm it is as well, we're getting on towards nearly 800 foot-pound. We're actually at about 770 foot-pounds of torque there. So that's, you know, it's nearly 250 foot-pound of torque increase from some sports cats and a tune throughout most of the rev range, pretty much all the way along. So for the fattest part of the torque curve, from 3,000 RPM to 4,800, you've got the best part of 200 foot-pound of torque extra everywhere. So it's going to be insane. That also translates into the power. So we've gone, in the mid-range here, we've gone from just over 400 wheel horsepower to 550 wheel horsepower, well, 560 wheel horsepower. So again, 150 wheel horsepower increase pretty much all the way through. As you can see up here, it's revved out a little bit more, so we've increased the rev limiter. We've gained, we're just here, it was so close. I'm sure if we could get the car a little bit colder, so if we could get the intake temps down, I'm almost certain it'd clip 650 wheel horsepower. But I'm happy where it is. It's sort of right at 640, 645. It was so tempting to let it cool right down and try and get a halo run, but at that sort of power level, you know, you're splitting hairs. It's absolutely monstrous, is that. So this package, somewhere in the region of 3 grand buys you almost another engine bolted to the top of what's already there. I mean, to put it into perspective, a Fiesta ST makes around 200 foot-pound of torque. So you've basically bolted an extra Fiesta engine to this car with nothing more than sports cats and a remap. It's pretty impressive. As it stands, the big thing that we're noting again, and we can see it here, a little bit of intervention from the ECU. That is as a result of the intake temps getting up towards 70 degrees. I'm confident if we ran this car in winter, it'd be over 650 wheel horsepower. If we let it cool right down, what you'll find is this little dip here and where it drops off there. Never feel that on the road. You wouldn't even see that on a rolling road. It's because our dyno is so sensitive to any changes that it sort of shows them up, and you can see it in the stock torque here. It's sort of all over the place there, whereas ours is lovely and smooth. Again, if you had a rolling road with the actual roller that gives all that inertia, you'd smooth all this out and you wouldn't see any of it, but that's not the idea behind having a hub dyno, especially four-wheel drive one. So, aside from the intake temps, everything looks really, really good at full throttle on the dyno. So what the next thing to do will be is get the car on the floor, take it out on the road, test all the part throttle, all the different drive modes. I mean, these are things that people overlook when they're thinking about tuning a vehicle, or indeed some people that are tuning vehicles. It's all well and good getting it doing what it should do on there, but you need to understand what's it like at part load, what's the adjustments like for ignition timing when you're pulling away from the lights, especially if you've added some extra crackles, so you've messed around with the off-throttle ignition timing to retard it, to give you that extra crackle. If you've not set that up right, you're going to start getting a car that's jerking, it doesn't feel nice to pull away from lights. All that sort of stuff needs testing on the road. You can't do that on a dyno. So we'll take it out now, do the part throttle stuff, log it on the road to see how that compares to the logs that we've got from being on the dyno, where the load is different, understand what that does to the intake temps, because you might find driving it down the road where it's got more flow through under all the grills rather than just being pointed at the front, we might get lower intake temps and make a little bit more boost. So let's do that now, then we'll get some cool videos and hopefully some nice rollers. Then we'll be delivering this back to the customer and getting his verdict on what we think about it. So for direct comparison, what I've got here is the tuned data logs. So it's basically a complete replica of logs from the stock file versus once we've put the tune file on. So to give you a brief oversight, we can now see we've got a wide open throttle from right down at the bottom here at 1500 RPM. So Callum at this point on the dyno has got the pedal flat to the floor and the dyno is holding the car back. And then here, where it starts to build RPM, is where the dyno is released and we've gone into basically a dyno pull. If we had any big dips in this anywhere or anything like that, that would be a little bit of a view on that the ECU is trying to control something, so it's unhappy with something that it's seeing. So for example, if it tries to overshoot its boost pressure target by more than what the parameters are in the ECU, it'll close the throttle to try and control it, which is similar to what we saw in the stock file. So in this case, we're pretty much happy with everything that we can see here, all the way up to the red line. We've got a wide open throttle, so that's perfect. In terms of boost pressure, we've now got a much better amount of boost at the bottom there. So at 2,700 RPM, we've gone from making like 1 bar of boost to 2 bar. It's a massive, massive jump. And that's, as a result of that, we would purposefully check to make sure that we've not got a massive amount of ignition pull. We've not adjusted the knock control on this car, so we've not relaxed any knock sensors. All we've done is increase the boost pressure, increase the amount of timing that we're looking for, and what we want to see is, at this point, are we starting to see excessive heat? Are we starting to see any ignition pull? Which both of those things would be a bit of guidance as to the fact that the car's not happy with what we're asking it to do, and we'd have to turn it down from there. But in this case, we've got absolutely zero ignition pull until we get to 4,000 RPM. On one cylinder, we've got 2.25. I'm happy with that. If it was around, I don't know, 5 or 6 or something like that, it'd be way too much. But anything up to 3, we wouldn't even pay that any attention. It's specifically only on one cylinder, so that's most likely it's picking up a little bit of noise from somewhere else within the engine. All the way through there, we've got no more than 2.25, even all the way up to the top, so I'm happy with that. The boost pressure goes from about 2 bar there down to 1.5, so that's perfect. It was not much more at redline than what it was doing standard. It's actually the advanced ignition that we've been able to put in that's given it just that little bit more. The next thing that we did, and is really important if you're going to start increasing boost pressure, is increasing the amount of fuel that the engine receives. So in this case, we've got a commanded, so it starts to enrichen at 3,600 RPM instead of 5,000 where it was doing it before. And it's straight down to 0.8, around 0.84, 0.85 is where we sort of want it to be. Whereas previously it was pretty much lambda 1 all the way through until the very, very top where it dropped down to like 0.95. So we need more fuel if we're going to start increasing boost, otherwise things get very hot and it won't make extra power without any extra fuel. So in terms of everything that I can see here, I'm more than happy. There's nothing screaming out of that it's unhappy with anything. In terms of ignition, we're still making similar to what we were before, but because we've got increased boost pressure, it targets less ignition timing at the same point. So if we were to drop the boost pressure down now, what that would do is it would now increase ignition timing as a result, trying to get to the target torque settings that we've got within the ECU. So overall, I'm very, very happy with the results there. We can see from the dyno graphs that it's really, really good. I mean, it's going to be monstrous. So from here on in, we're pretty much happy to let that car go back to the customer, providing it drives well on the road. That's the Cayenne now back with the customer, and I can honestly tell you that's got to be the fastest Jeep, SUV, whatever you want to call it, that I've ever driven. The thing is ridiculous. I can assure you it's going to be getting put through its paces. I think the first thing that Andrew said, who owns the car, is how fast will it go with my trailer with my GT3 on the back? So I'm pretty confident he's going to put it through his paces and come back to us with loads and loads of feedback. Really enjoyed tuning that one and driving it in particular. I mean, I've got a Cayenne, but it's a diesel and it's got loads of torque, feels great, but that car almost felt like a 911 on steroids. It's really, really strange experience. Hopefully you've enjoyed watching the video. We've got everything across, and if there's anything that we've missed, just comment or send us a message. Do follow the channel, follow us on social media. It makes a big difference when we can see that people are engaging with the brand. It helps us do more videos, and ultimately we get more across and you see more behind the curtain. We're now going to be moving on to stage 2 on my GT4 718, so that video is going to be coming very soon. So keep an eye out for that one, and thanks again for watching.